One of the most interesting countries in the world is Tibet, land of isolation, which through its deliberately adopted policy of exclusion has piqued the imagination and baffled the traveler who would explore its mysteries. With the exception of its eastern frontier, it is surrounded on all sides by gigantic mountain ranges, scalable at comparatively few points. The mighty Himalayas, with the world's highest mountain, Mount Everest, form Tibet's southern boundary and contribute to its isolation. Among the many superlatives that can be used about this strange land, perhaps the most important is that it is the highest country in the world, its deepest valleys being 13,000 feet above the sea. To man and beast, Tibet can offer only the extremes of bitter cold and stifling heat, and a meager living scratched from an unproductive soil. In many places gold is to be found, for Tibet is a deeply religious country, and the gods of superstition and fear prevent the development of the untold wealth that lies buried deep for future ages. The yak is Tibet's most indispensable animal, and he lives and thrives in the high altitudes of his lofty country. He is transport animal, food giver, fuel maker, and his hair and hide are used for tents and clothing. He is the Tibetans' chief source of wealth. The country supports only a small population, less than 3 million, a large percentage of whom are celibates residing in monasteries. With the exception of Lhasa, the capital, the people live in small villages with an average of perhaps 25 or 30 inhabitants. It is estimated that there are about 130,000 of these little settlements. Tibet is the most religious and priest-ridden country in the world, its religion being Lamaism, a form of Buddhism. Religious shrines dot the landscape and are erected to commemorate the memory of some Lama or saint. The houses are invariably built square of stone set in mud with flat roofs and no chimneys. They have but one entrance, and the windows consist of removable frames covered with oiled paper. Glass is unknown. It is doubtful that human life could exist in this country without the yak, for in addition to supplying the milk from which butter and cheese are made, its flesh is dried and eaten as a principal food. Although their religion forbids the slaying of animals, the Lama priests seek to solve the problem by blessing the poor beasts and praying that they may be reborn on a higher plane. When mixed with straw and dried, yak dung is the average Tibetan's only fuel, and he considers himself lucky if he has enough of it with which to cook his simple meals. Owing to the scarcity of this fuel, hot water for bathing purposes is seldom used, and even when thoroughly chilled, these poor people cannot afford to make a fire for warmth. Even the skin of the yak is brought into the service of the housewife in the making of butter, which is unquestionably the most valuable commodity in all of Tibet. An odd feature of the yak skin sack is the fact that the hair is left on the inside because its coarseness is said to provide a friction which hastens the process. Although the sack appears to be filled to capacity with milk, about 9/10 of its size is due to the fact that it has been blown up with air, so as to provide more room for the necessary rolling about of its precious contents, part of which comes out in the form of butter. The hairs of the yak skin, which have been generously mixed with this choice delicacy, do not seem to mar its value or its taste as far as the natives are concerned. Tremendous quantities of butter are consumed by the Tibetans in their butter tea, which provides them with high power resistance to cold and hunger. It is thoroughly boiled, after which it is strained and poured into a long, narrow churn provided with a plunger. Salt and soda, and as much butter as can be afforded are added. Tea thus prepared is like soup, and the average Tibetan consumes from 30 to 50 cups of this tea a day. Every man, woman, or child wears a charm box as a protection from the evil spirits which they believe to exist, and the vending of talismans by the priesthood is an extremely profitable business. Because of their isolation, it is necessary that Tibetan women weave their own cloth. A woman has much influence in Tibet. She is the family treasurer, and the responsibility of the entire household rests upon her shoulders, a position unusual among the women of the East. The style of Tibetan dress has changed but little for several centuries. There are strict laws which regulate the quality, material, and color of the garment worn by each class, and woe betide the social climber who dares to violate these laws. Every woman in Tibet lights jewelry, and around her neck is the eternal charm box. Their earrings are heavy enough to require a special thread support, which is suspended from the upper part of the ear. The custom of protruding the tongue, showing that no evil is being spoken, and opening the hands, showing that no weapons are concealed, is a polite greeting as well as a mark of native culture. Transportation is one of Tibet's greatest problems, for roads like those in Western countries do not exist. The routes are mere tracks across the endless plains or narrow paths clinging to the mountainsides and following the riverbeds. A Tibetan wise man once remarked that all the trouble and conflict in Western civilization was brought about by the introduction of wheels, and by way of praising his own country, he emphasized the fact that there is no wheeled traffic in Tibet. These unique ferry boats are made of yak skin and are a light and treacherous craft, requiring considerable skill to manipulate them, but they help to make of an isolated country. Perhaps the world's most unique methods of transportation are to be found in this strange country, where rope bridges span the streams, and all travelers must be acrobats, or accept the alternative of remaining at home. The whole question of the future of Tibet depends upon her transport. Trade at the present time is negligible, and distances are so great that the cost of carrying goods exceeds many times its value. Outside of Vatican City, Tibet is the only country in the world ruled over by a priest king. There is no government as we know it, and all power is concentrated in the person of a Dalai Lama. Great monasteries house thousands of these lamas, 1/3 of the entire male population being priests and entirely dependent upon the other 2/3 of the population for their livelihood. Often religious dances are held in the courtyard of the monastery. These are given to frighten the people and spread the doctrines of Lamaism. The practice of medicine is a church monopoly. Surgery and dentistry are unknown. The priests are all doctors and combine the healing art with that of religion. The treatment is the reciting of prayers and the performance of religious ceremonies. According to the priest doctors, 440 diseases afflict mankind, for all of which there are charms and spells. Dried and pounded dog's bones, fox's blood, peacock feathers, gold dust, pounded land crabs, and many other nauseous substances form the basis of most of the medicines. 8 years are required to learn sufficient prayers to cope with this very complicated situation. And so life goes on among the people of Tibet, where the progress of civilization is at the mercy of priestcraft, and the destinies of men are eternally limited by the impregnable boundaries of superstition, ignorance, and fear. And it is with this thought that we say, farewell to Tibet, land of isolation.